The Duramax that started it all, the LB7. And then here we've got the LBZ, the holy grail of Duramax trucks. Now the LB7 did start it all. It brought common rail power to the 3/4 and 1 ton truck market, which was revolutionary for the time in 2001. I mean, this took market by storm. Everybody was modifying these. You could tune them and do an extra 200 horsepower with just some simple modifications. That was game changer in the market at that time. The LBZ came in and it was one of the most capable trucks in 2006 and 2007. And it was just really hard to beat the overall package that the LBZ was, with the Allison transmission backing up the legendary LBZ Duramax. So today we're gonna have a little bit of a battle between your LB7 and your LBZ Duramax. We're gonna break down all the other components that actually go into these trucks and what makes one better than the other. We're gonna tally up the LB7 over here and the LBZ over here. Let's go over some of the specs from the LB7 versus the LBZ. So first off, let's talk about horsepower. That's what everyone wants to know. Your LB7s came with 300 horsepower. Your LBZ came with 360. And for torque, what matters when you're actually towing, your LB7 came with 520 pound-feet and the LBZ 650 pound-feet. So out of the box, you just get a much more powerful truck in the LBZ. So horsepower, obviously the LBZ makes more horsepower, 360, and a lot more torque. So win for the LBZ. Now most of the other engine specs are about the same. The LB7 does have a slightly higher compression ratio than the LBZ at 17.5 to 1 versus 16.8 to 1. But pretty much everything else across the board is about the same for those. Now let's start with airflow. What are the differences between your LB7 and your LBZ? The LB7 was the first iteration of the Duramax and they had stuff to learn. So they had a flat style filter and intake that was pretty restrictive, and that carried over to your LLY as well. But on the LBZ, they realized that after all the overheating problems with the LLY Duramax trucks. So the LBZ has a much larger cylindrical style filter. You'll see the Donaldson is kind of our preferred stock filter, and those can flow upwards of 600 horsepower. Now the turbo inlet itself is very, very small cast piece on the LB7 that has 3 bullets that go up to the turbo. On the LBZ, it's a massive plastic piece, so it's a little bit better for heat rejection, and it just flows way, way better than your LB7 or LLY turbo mouthpieces do. That's going to be another win for the LBZ. GM made massive upgrades to this, so LBZ it is. Now let's talk turbochargers. On your LB7, you had a fixed geometry IHI turbo, and then on the LBZ, you actually had a variable vane technology Garrett turbocharger. So that was a game changer in 2004.5 for the LLY when they introduced the VVT, VGT, or variable vane turbos. That's going to give you more power across a broader RPM range. It does add more moving parts, so there's more things that can fail. We have seen the LB7 turbos be by far the most reliable and last the absolute longest out of any of the turbos from any other vehicles. And I think the LB7 is going to win this one because it's a lot more reliable turbo, less moving parts, less chance that it's actually going to break. So win LB7. The LB7 also had a wastegate. So then you're going to get into the downpipe. The downpipe on the LB7, you're going to see it, it's much larger. It has a giant bell mouth design. It's because that wastegate is on the back half of that turbo. And on the LBZ, you're going to have just a standard, a little bit smaller than a 3-inch coming all the way down. And they're both crimped and bad just due to the cab design. But the LB7 one looks a lot bigger, and because it has that wastegate on the back of that turbo there, and they're going to flow about the same. So, I mean, this is a tough one, but I mean, honestly, LB7 is going to win this one, except it is a little bit harder to install, but LB7 win on the downpipe. And sticking with airflow, we're going to look at the intake runners. So your LB7 and LLY had pretty small intake runners, and the Y-bridge is all kind of restrictive in that area. Now the LBZ did increase it by about 20% or so, so it's a much larger, better flowing design. And a lot of times people actually upgrade to the LBZ intake runners on their 01 to 5 Duramax trucks. So now let's talk cooling system. The LBZ had to upgrade everything for cooling because they noticed the overheating issues with the earlier trucks. So they upgraded the radiator. So it is a massively upgraded radiator. It's going to be a lot bigger than the LB7 and the LLY. So it's going to be a win for the radiator from the LBZ. And the water pump has also been upgraded for the LBZ. It's got a bigger outlet on there. It's just a better overall unit. And now we're actually retrofitting the older trucks with an LBZ water pump in a kind of mashed together cover between your LB7 and LBZ kind of style. So it's a much better water pump on the LBZ. So it's going to be another win for the LBZ. Now let's talk emissions. So these two trucks both did come with emissions. Now the LB7 did have a California and a federal version. So the federal, obviously no CATs, no EGR, very simple, very good truck, but there were a decent amount of California trucks, obviously mostly in the California region over there on the West Coast, but we do see them quite a bit. So those did come with a mechanical operated EGR and a catalytic converter. Now there's a little bit of a difference between the LBZ and the LB7 emission system, even if they are fully equipped California trucks. The LBZ EGR is electronically controlled versus the mechanical of the LB7. The LBZ also has a two-stage catalytic converter, so it's a little bit more advanced to meet the higher standards set by the government to meet for the emissions. So your tailpipe emissions are going to be a little bit less from the factory on an LBZ truck. So the California emissions LB7 versus the LBZ, I think the LBZ is going to have a little bit better emission system versus the California LB7s, but the fact that you could get an LB7 without emissions equipment on it, it's going to be a win for the LB7. Now let's talk about the fuel system. This is a hot topic that everybody wants to know about. Now I kind of blame the LB7s for this one, given all Duramax a bad rap. Oh, they all have injector issues. No, they don't. The LB7 is the only one that truly did have injector issues from the factory, and that gave everything else that reputation, which kind of sucks. But the reasons why the LB7 actually made that bad reputation is because they decided to put the injectors under the valve cover. It's a huge pain in the ass to change. You got to take almost everything off of the engine and get all the way into the heads just to change the injectors. So at that point, you might as well change all 8. And it's just a huge, huge bill when you're dealing with 8 common rail injectors. You're going to want to probably do lines with that. You have to have a massive install kit. It's just a massive headache and something that you don't really want to deal with. Oh, and don't even get me started on the cups in the heads. I mean, it's just another spot for these things to leak. So for those reasons, the LB7 is definitely behind the LBZ when it comes to fuel injection system. The LB7 injector also has a VCO style nozzle. So that means the needle inside of the injector has to seal off every orifice that has the injector spray pattern on it. So instead of just sealing one hole, like the newer LLY and up sack style injectors, you're gonna have to seal one orifice on the new ones versus all the orifices on the old ones. So it's a lot easier for these injectors to leak and just cause more issues down the road and need to be replaced. So for those reasons, it's a lot more difficult to deal with an LB7. Now the new injectors from Bosch have a new coating on the nozzle that have kind of solved that issue, and we've seen much longer longevity out of that. And there are plenty of aftermarket companies like S&S, Exergy, and even Dynamite Diesel that do offer sack style injectors that are going to be much better than the original factory injectors equipped in these LB7 trucks. But your LBZ, I mean, you can change those. They're externally mounted, so they actually have the valve covers that actually go up and around the injectors, so you can put them straight in. It's a lot easier to change 1 or 2 at a time if you need to, and there's just a lot less problems in general. You don't have that all under the valve cover, heating up, cooling down, covered in oil, all that stuff, and you don't have any cups to deal with, so that's one less spot for them to leak. Much better design, and I'm really glad that GM actually figured that out pretty early on. Now, what feeds the injectors? It's going to be your high pressure fuel pump or your CP3. Now, neither of these trucks had lift pumps, and GM didn't include a lift pump until 2017 with the L5P platform, which they kind of redesigned everything. But your LBZ CP3 is commonly retrofitted on the older ones. You do have to get tuning, but the LB7 CP3 doesn't flow as much and doesn't go to as high of RPM. Now you have the metering valve that is going to be on the LBZ that is going to just allow more fuel to flow. You can always upgrade that stuff on the older truck, but from the factory, the LB7 CP3 does not flow as much as the LBZ. One of my pet peeves, I own an LLY, so I have to deal with this, is the FICM. I'm scared to death that that thing's gonna fail one day. I mean, knock on wood, I don't wanna deal with that because you can't get them from GM. We have been begging Bosch for years to actually come back out with this thing because it is obsolete and no one is making one. So I'm hoping I don't fry the board one day and I'm stuck stranded with a truck that's not even gonna run, and I have to pay thousands of dollars to find one that's hopefully good that I don't even know about because it's been used and I'm ordering it online or finding it in a junkyard. So the LB7 does have a FICM, and that just adds more complexity to the entire system as a whole. I mean, you have a whole nother module sitting right under the hood. It's very open to the elements that if you're pressure washing it, you want to be careful not to kind of pressure wash around that system. You don't want to let it get water in there or contamination or debris. So you just something to really be mindful of. It's a whole nother system that controls the injectors, and the truck won't run without it. Now the LBZ, on the other hand, was the first truck to actually integrate that FICM fuel injection control module into the ECM. So it eliminates that. It's about 138 wires less in the ECM, so that's just a much better system. Because of everything with the LB7 fuel system, LBZ, LBZ, LBZ. LBZ wins all fuel system arguments, period. Now, what's controlling the engine in general? That's going to be the ECM and the computer system. So for LBZ, they went to a LAN-style CAN bus system that is far superior, much faster communication, and a lot more processing power within the ECM. It's also a lot more stable than your LB7 trucks. The LB7 and LOY had kind of an older, outdated system that is very susceptible to actually breaking the ECM. We've seen this happen quite a few times, and it's really scary. You don't really want to deal with getting a new ECM. It's expensive, it's a pain in the butt, and you have to get tuning for it, take it to the dealer if you need a OEM tune on there. The LBZ just has a much more reliable computing system that runs the truck, which is really good. Now let's talk transmissions. So your LB7 is pretty cool. You got two options. You got your ZF6 6-speed manual transmission. It's still pretty rare, but you could get that in there, or you would get the 5-speed Allison. 5-speed Allison was awesome, and for the time, nothing could touch it. None of these Ford transmissions, definitely not the Dodge transmissions, those things were junk, but the 5-speed was really solid. LBZ went to a 6-speed Allison, which was even better. I mean, you could upgrade those things, throw a couple valve body upgrades, up the line pressure, and I mean, you could hold 150, almost a 200 horse tune on top of that LBZ, and you'd be solid for a little while, as long as you're careful driving it. But the LB7 and LY 5-speeds, they're a little bit more susceptible when running that higher power level to actually slipping clutches and causing damage internally. The 6-speed has a more advanced valve body, it has a different TCM, all that stuff is going to be different for the 6-speed, making it a better transmission overall. Now, if you're going to build a transmission, it doesn't really matter which one you're going to do. You could build a 5-speed for 1,000 horsepower, you could build a 6-speed for 1,000 horsepower, or anything in between stock power and that. So if you're building a transmission, really doesn't matter. But out of the box, from a factory truck, if you just want to do a simple tuner, LBZ is by far better when it comes to the transmission. Now, manuals did come in the LBZ. Now, I don't think there are very many. I honestly think there's about 120 of them from what I've read on some of the internet forums, but I can't confirm that. But I have seen a couple, at least photos of them, so I believe that they're out there. I know it's kind of a mythical beast of a manual LBZ. I mean, that is the holy grail of diesel trucks. For the LBZ, it's going to win in the 6-speed category for the transmission. Now for the bottom end, this is kind of a tough one. There's not going to be one clear winner, so we're going to break this one up into a couple different parts. So we've got the block. Let's start there, because the casing for everything. How is it holding it all together? Your LBZ is going to have a little bit stronger of a block. It's going to have taller main caps, has more material and design. It's just overall a little bit more robust. And this is just the block, not including anything inside of it, just the block itself. It's going to be a win for LBZ. Your LB7 is definitely a little bit weaker in some areas than your LBZ. Your LB7 is going to have weaker rods, but it's going to have stronger pistons. Your LBZ is going to have stronger rods, but then the crankshaft on the LBZ is notorious for braking. Now, I think it's a little bit blown out of proportion, and there's a bunch of different factors that go into this, whether it's a worn out damper. A lot of people say, oh, don't hit cruise on the highway because you're going to break your crankshaft. I think that's total BS, honestly. I mean, I think it's just luck of the draw at this point, and oftentimes your damper gets old, wears out, can spin on there and throw the whole balance off. So damper, I think, is the #1 cause of crankshaft breakage. The LBZ is definitely more common to break the crankshafts than the LB7 is, so a lot of people will use an LB7 crankshaft in their build on their LBZ, LLY, LML, all those trucks. A lot of people do use the factory LB7 crankshaft because it is notoriously strong. I'm going to give the win to LB7 on this one. LB7s have a really strong crankshaft, and that's the way to go. And what's connecting the crankshaft to the rest of the engine? That's going to be your connecting rods. Connecting rods, clearly way weaker on the LB7. You usually say 500 to 600 horsepower and they start to bend. The LBZ, they upgraded to a more heavy-duty rod. There's more material. It's just a stronger overall design. So win for LBZ when it comes to connecting rods. Now the LB7's pistons are better. Now why do I say that? There's a couple of reasons. The first one is going to be the wrist pin bushing. So for 2006 and newer, they went to a wrist pin bushing design on the piston itself. These are all cast aluminum, and it's a little bit weaker than you would like because you're taking material away. And when these trucks have such a high compression at that 16 to 17 to 1 compression ratio, you're really putting a lot of stress on those pistons. When you're turning these trucks up, you're creating a lot of heat inside the cylinders and just causing more damage. So they're common to crack along that wrist pin line and then cause hot spots under the lip. So a lot of people take LB7 pistons, de-lip them, because the piston bowl comes up and kind of comes around like that. So if you delip that, make that straight up and down, you're not going to have the fuel coming in and getting caught and causing hot pockets, which ultimately leads to holes in your pistons. Now, we did just have Ruthless LBZ tag us in a couple posts showing the holes in his pistons, and I feel so bad for him, but we're here to help him out and get him the right set of pistons. The Molle Racecast is the way to go for most daily driver trucks. So we're going to go with the LB7 pistons versus LBZ pistons, the wrist pin bushing in the LBZ versus the standard pistons in the LB7. The LB7s are better. They don't crack as much. They don't blow holes in them as much. People delip them and throw them in all the other builds to hold upwards of 1,000 horsepower. So LB7, you're a winner here when it comes to pistons. Now, cylinder heads. The cupless cylinder heads on the LBZ are the way to go. Obviously, they're going to be better, but you can get the cupless heads from Fleece for your LB7. It's just one more spot for it to leak, and it's just kind of, LB7 can't win this one. LBZ with the heads. The one thing that a lot of people don't know about is actually the cam gear. The LBZ and up, they had a whole bunch of things that they needed to take care of from GM. They wanted to reduce that vibrating, clattery diesel sound and feel when you're getting into a truck. They wanted a really refined, nice truck. And the LBZ has a spring-loaded cam gear that's going to actually reduce a lot of that vibration through the gear train. Where the LB7, it's just a solid one. So a lot of guys will use that LBZ cam gear on all the older trucks as well. It's just a much better system, and it's going to kind of get rid of that diesel feel, but you still get the diesel sound. The LBZ has a spring-loaded cam gear, so win for the LBZ. Now let's talk body and exterior. You've seen that there's a few different variations of the LB7 between the GMC and the Chevy. You've got 4 total different body styles. You've got your 0102 on each of them, and then you've got your 0304 where they upgraded that. So the 0102 is kind of the round eye, bubble hood, whatever you want to call that one. I think it looks really good, but I mean, it's kind of definitely that older style, still looks more 90s. And then 2003, they really kind of modernized it and gave it the cat eye look for the Chevys. And on the GMCs, they took the bumper, painted that. It's painted in chrome, no plastic on the front end of the GM, except for in the grille, which is really minimal. And I think just looks like a really clean truck overall. The 03 to 04 trucks just look incredible. Now for GMCs, the LBZ and the LB7 from 03, 04 look identical. There's no differences as on the body, but the badges are different. On the LBZ, when they switch to the 6-speed, they have an Allison in front of the Duramax, and on the 01 to 5, it's just Duramax diesel in the gray and red. So that's how you can quickly kind of glance at one of these trucks and see if it's an LOY or LBZ. Now the cat eye trucks, they did change a couple things. The hood was a little bit lower profile on the 03, 04 LB7 Chevy trucks. On the LBZ, actually late LLY technically in 05, they went to kind of that HD hood that gave it a lot bigger and more demanding presence on the road, because it is ultimately a heavy duty truck and they really wanted it to look that way. The GMC is that sleek, refined, really classic ride, and the Chevy is that big burly, just kind of man's truck. So there's a couple differences there. And then the interior was very similar. 0102 had kind of a more basic interior. They had that really, really ugly steering wheel and just the gauge cluster that I'm not a huge fan of. Now in 03, they did upgrade that and kind of make it more modern. So they carried that over from 03 basically to 07 with very, very minor differences. I mean, you could get the LT with the heated seats, the Bose stereo system in 03 and all the way up to 07. Really no changes there. Overall, really, really nice trucks. And I think they've held up great for the most part compared to some of the other stuff. I mean, you don't have all the dashes cracking like the Dodge trucks do. My truck's got 400,000, there's no dash cracks. So, I mean, it's very rare we see a full dash falling apart. I've seen it a couple times, but nowhere near as much as the Ram trucks. Now, these is kind of a difficult one because there's a couple different body styles for those LB7s. You had your 01 to 02 trucks, which had a more basic interior, and then your 03, 04 trucks, which had basically the same interior as your LBZ did. But the cat eye Chevys didn't have that HD hood, and it was just kind of a more low profile, kind of sleek, angular look. But the LBZ cat eye, I mean, is pretty much widely accepted as the best looking truck ever. And I kind of agree, but even the GMC version, it's just such a sleek, classic looking truck. It's just a super nice design. So either GMC or cat eye is going to be a win for the LBZ. So overall, I mean, the LBZ is going to take this one. Ultimately, the LBZ is accepted as a holy grail of Duramax trucks for a reason, and that's why. I think that's most of the differences there. If there's anything we missed, let us know down in the comments, because I know this list is just too long. I mean, it's insane. I try to do it out there with both trucks next to me, and I just couldn't keep everything straight in my head without having some sort of a reference point. So if there's anything we missed or anything you guys want to go over, or any other comparisons you guys want to do, maybe L5P versus an LBZ, something like that, go ahead and let us know. Both are great engines, and DMAX Store offers just about anything you can modify them with. So if you guys want to upgrade your Duramax, head over to dmaxstore.com and let us know if you want to see other videos like this comparing other Duramax models.